to the What Really Happened radio show. The history the government hopes you never learn. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It's Monday, April 11th, start of a brand new week here. We've got a lot of stuff to talk about. The phone lines are open, 877-300-7645. Daniel's in our control room, keeping us out of trouble. We've already got a caller calling in right now. And I got to tell you, over this last weekend, this whole vote stealing, vote rigging, ignoring the will of the people just got so much in your face. It's amazing. I was talking to a friend of mine earlier today saying that he's expecting the pitchforks and the torches to come out any second. And it does feel like it's getting close here. Now, apparently, over in Missouri at the Republican delegate meeting in St. Charles, there was a bit of a scuffle there. What Ted Cruz is doing, Ted Cruz knows he can't win the popular vote against Donald Trump, even with the massive stealing. So what he's trying to do is hijack the delegates, and basically Cruz's people are loading up these delegate meetings. They're crowding on in there early so that the Trump people can't get in. So even the delegates that are nominally being assigned to Donald Trump are actually Cruz supporters. And apparently they got this on video, which we have linked to the front page of WhatReallyHappened.com. And this is apparently their new strategy over at ex-Republic TV. They're quoting Trump advisor Stephen Miller saying, Cruz doesn't win voters, he's winning the GOP insiders. That's who he's courting. Now, over in Arizona, a man has filed a lawsuit challenging the results of Arizona's primaries, saying that there were massive reassignment of voters to the wrong party, with the result that a lot of Trump supporters went on in and discovered they were all of a sudden listed as libertarian voters and they couldn't vote. And so this John Brakey is filing a lawsuit with the Superior Court that calls on the certification of the election to be revoked and canceled. And he doesn't want a new certification until the election is properly conducted and in compliance with every Arizona law. In other words, we got to get honest elections, because so far this is setting a record for crookedness. Trump beat Cruz by 30% in a Virginia district. Cruz got the delegates. That's how blatant it's out there. What you want doesn't matter. We want our Canadian president. And, of course, there was a huge stink in Colorado. Now, last August, the GOP party in Colorado announced they weren't going to bother having a caucus. They were just going to have a GOP convention and sort things out. But that convention was overwhelmed by Cruz supporters. Trump supporters were not allowed in. They were literally being stopped at the door. And as a result, Cruz got all of the Colorado delegates. And that's how in your face it is. There's even one report that's coming out here, let's see, at the Gateway Pundit, which is a very good source, saying basically that on the ballot at the Colorado GOP convention, the Trump delegates were simply erased. And Ted Cruz's delegates were listed twice to make it look like there was a full slate. Cruz is just stealing the election. And he's being allowed to do it by a political establishment that is openly contemptuous of the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. Because under the Constitution, Ted Cruz cannot serve as president. He's not a natural-born U.S. citizen. In fact, for the first 12 years he was in this country, he was an illegal immigrant. Do you realize how corrupt our government has become? Both of the candidates of the two leading parties, the preferred candidates, Ted Cruz and Hillary Clinton, are both ineligible to serve as president. We know Hillary Clinton has violated Title 18. That email about instructing her subordinate to strip classification headings from a message and send it non-secure, right there is a felony violation. And Title 18 includes a provision saying that anybody who violates Title 18 is ineligible to hold public office. So there we are. The preferred candidates of both established political parties can't actually serve as president under the letter of the law. And the leadership of the political parties don't care. They just want the party to go on. They want to have the control over the wealth, and control over your wealth. Have access to your children to fling them into wars of conquest. Now, Donald Trump is understandably set with the GOP over just outright canceling the caucus. And a lot of the Colorado voters are angry as well. There was one guy posted a video, apparently a lifelong member of the GOP, burned his membership paperwork right on the video. And I got a lot of emails from people in Colorado. They're furious. They're absolutely furious about this thing. Finally, a story coming out of IntelliHub.com where a Trump delegate all of a sudden discovered his name had been removed from the roster of delegates. And somebody else's name was put into his spot. And the only reason he thinks that happened is that he voted for Trump. They're literally trying to craft a Cruz victory by hijacking all the delegates. The delegates are supposed to be representing the will of the voters. All right, we're going to go ahead and grab ourselves a phone call. Dustin in New Jersey, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello?
You're on the air. Dustin, you're on the air.
Yeah, hi, Mike. Yeah, it was blank there for a minute. Yeah, I just want to say, you're witnessing a phenomenon. This is a global debt prison.
Yes.
That's what these people are running. And this is not about Donald Trump. This is about the little people, the 99% versus the system in the world. Britain, France, Germany, it's all tied together to the same oligarch group, small group of people controlling everything. And it's coming to a time where you can't bring a knife to a gunfight. You got to bring the bazooka. These people won't let Donald Trump in, period. You can go, anybody can go file lawsuits, this or that. It's not going to matter. George Carlin said it. They own the banks. They own the judges. They own the media. Bring a bazooka, not a knife. Because this is what it's coming down to, Mike.
Yeah, I'm afraid you're right.
I voted for Obama, Mike. I voted for Obama, which was a big mistake because I got suckered. But after that, I did a lot of research, and people need to wake up. And not just here. In France, Britain, Germany, wake up. The system is rigged. It's rigged for a small
It is. We're seeing the rise of a global fascist dictatorship. We're all being taxed into poverty. We're spending more on taxes than we spend on housing, food, and clothing combined. At the same time, we find out that all of these governments around the world have passed special laws to allow themselves to evade taxes in places like Panama. That's the way the system is. Taxes are just for you little people. They're bringing back serfdom and feudalism. That's what they're trying to do. They're trying to take us back to the Middle Ages.
Exactly. You're a little slave to do what you're told, to look down and shut up. But it comes to a time when you got to say enough is enough. People need to start speaking out and fighting back. Because like I said, going to court is not going to do anything. They own the judges. Period.
Yeah, well, we saw that with the lawsuits about Cruz's citizenship that are just being tossed out under the flimsiest of pretexts, where the judge says, oh, come on, common sense says he can run. No, this is not about common sense. It's about the rule of law and the Constitution. And it's like I was saying before, the two preferred candidates of the traditional political parties are both legally ineligible to serve as president, and the party leadership doesn't care. They absolutely don't.
This is not about Donald Trump people. This is about the little people versus the establishment, the elite, the system. That's what this is about. Don't get put on one person. This is about the little people versus the establishment. That's
the haves versus the have-nots. I mean, for 22 years I've been trying to find a way to peacefully change this nation back to what it is supposed to be, but I'm hearing from everywhere people are ready to just start the violence. I'd like to avoid it. I don't think I can stop it anymore. We got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And apparently over at Harvard, one of their top law professors, Einar Elhausch, has filed an amicus brief with the courts. Amicus simply means I'm a friend of the court and I've got an opinion here. And basically lays out point by point by point why Ted Cruz is not eligible to be president of the United States of America. And we know Ted Cruz is being protected on this issue by the media, by the GOP party, by his own supporters, and to date, the court system. they're throwing out all of these lawsuits challenging Cruz's presence on these state ballots under flimsy excuses. And the most common one is that nobody has standing to sue somebody who's trying to run for president who doesn't meet the constitutional requirement. Well, if ordinary American citizens don't have standing to sue the political system for unconstitutional behavior, then maybe it is time for the flaming torches and the pitchforks. However, over in Washington, D.C., another law professor, Victor Williams, has decided he's going to take this issue on. He's filed the paperwork to run for president himself, and that does give him standing. He's running as a write-in candidate for the GOP, and that gives him legal standing to file a lawsuit. We all know Ted Cruz is not eligible, and that shows you just how deteriorated, how corrupt our entire political structure has become when both the preferred GOP candidate and the preferred Democratic candidate are both legally ineligible to hold the office. All right, we're going to go ahead and grab ourselves a phone call. George in Texas, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, how you doing, Mike? All I have to say, what happened in Colorado, it wouldn't surprise me up and down these state conventions, all the way up to the national convention, that there be a hostile takeover. Not saying violence, but I'm just saying a hostile takeover of the leadership.
Well, that's what they're doing with the delegates. You know, they're openly admitting Ted Cruz is wooing the delegates to not go along with the will of the people. He's hijacking the process.
Well, you know, the thing is, it's more like I call into a local Christian talk radio show, and they cut me off where they're saying how much Ted Cruz is about Christian and all that stuff. I say, well, thou shalt not steal. That means don't steal delegates, and thou shalt not covet. That means what he don't have, trying to get, and thou shalt not commit adultery, and thou shalt not bear false witness, lying about Ben Carson. And they cut me off.
Well, of course, because, he's a Christian, and we have to believe, let's face it, these are the people who believe in talking snakes and magic trees, okay? They're not really capable of analyzing the real world. They are slaves to their beliefs. That's what beliefs exist for, to enslave free minds. And I'm not surprised you got cut off. And, it's kind of weird where we've got Cruz's supporters are running around saying that God has anointed Ted Cruz to be president of the United States of America. And my reply to that is, then why did God have him born in Canada?
He should be running against Mr. Trudeau. You know what I mean?
Yeah, why isn't, if he wants to have a political life, let him run in Canada where he's a citizen. Or let him, since he loves Israel so much, let him run over to Israel and run for the Knesset.
Exactly. But I'm just saying, just talking to people at work is more like, they think it's a time for a hostile takeover of the party, because they said the way they got the rules, you cannot get rid of leadership, you cannot get anything done, so I think it's a time for a hostile takeover.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, and I'm hearing that from a lot of people. There is so much anger out there right now. Sometimes I have to pick up this phone using an oven mitt.
Well, it's just the thing is, too, it's more like, I sat there and read the bylaws, the Republican Party of Texas bylaws. The leadership is not supposed to have any bias. They're supposed to be the stewards of the process.
Well, that's what they're supposed to be, but that's not how they're behaving. And the problem is they just changed the rules to get the result that they want. I mean, we're already hearing that for the GOP convention, they're going to suspend Rule 40E, which was only put in there in 2012 to keep Ron Paul off the floor. They just make up the rules as they go along, and we're supposed to say, oh, well, it's a rule. It must be right. It must be okay. The GOP leadership, would never, work against the will of the voters, and yet we're all learning this year just how corrupt this election system is. And it's nothing new. We know that there has been a lot of political deal-making in the election system and hijacking of the system. The Collier brothers, back during the first Clinton presidency, they wrote a wonderful book called Vote Scam. You can still get it online. We've all seen the movie Hacking Democracy, the documentary with Bev Harris. But this year, it's like they don't even care if we see what they're doing. In fact, maybe they just got sick and tired of trying to hide it all from us, and they're just going to go ahead and steal the election and say, yeah, this is the way the country is. Now just sit down and shut up and pay your taxes here. Because we can't have the rich pay taxes, so you have to do it.
Well, the thing is, this sounds like, and I'm sitting there thinking about this. This is the parallel between Byron Beckwith. You remember him, Mike?
Yeah.
How he was arrogantly saying, "Yeah, I killed that guy. You can't convict me." And guess what? He finally got justice served to him. I think this is what's going to happen to the establishment. They're so arrogantly, sitting there yawning, think we're not going to do nothing. I think they're going to be for a big surprise.
Well, every tyrant always thinks exactly the same thing until they take that one step too far. That's what happened to King Charles I. It's what happened to Ceausescu, what happened to Mussolini, what happened to Louis XVI, not to mention all those dead Celtic kings who keep bobbing up to the top of the peat bogs all over England.
But anyway, I sense a hostile takeover happening. And I got to say, it's going to be perfectly legal, just like the Battle of Athens. The state of Tennessee recognized the rebellion.
All right, well, again, I would like to avoid a bloody revolution in the streets of America because the wrong people always get killed in these things. But I think it's beyond my capability to hold it back because I'm hearing all this anger out there. People are furious. They're having that shock of waking up and realizing that they don't actually live in the country they were told they lived in. They live in something else that's very different and much darker, and they don't like it one tiny bit. And they're angry over the dictatorship, and they're angry over having been lied to for all these years about the true nature of our political system.
Well, thank you, Mike.
All right, thank you. We're going to let you go. My goodness, the phone lines are just cranking up here, and but I'm going to not take calls until after this next commercial break. Trump is surging in Pennsylvania, and there continues to be a big stink over in Wisconsin, where veteran DJ Lewis was claiming he was just 5 feet away from the GOP chairman Reince Priebus when he heard him giving instructions to use the Diebold machines in New York to make sure Donald Trump doesn't get over 50%. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, and we're going to go ahead and clear some of these phone calls out. Let's see. Paul in Montana, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mr. Rivero. How come we never hear of de facto royalty? As in, 300 years ago, Europeans came to Montana. They brought with them a lot of European wealth, so therefore they immediately confiscated the wealth-producing land. Over the generations, those people and their families that have had control of the wealth of the land have put their kids through college in positions of influence, as in who runs for office here in Missoula County, or what have you. So anyway, we've got this de facto royalty here in America that nobody talks about, and yet we're wondering why this delegate system is total.
Well, I think it's inaccurate to use the word royalty because that implies inherited titles, which is definitely something that Americans are not comfortable with. We saw how that works out with, the Bush presidencies. But anytime you have accumulated wealth and power, it's going to attempt to pervert society to its own ends. We're seeing that with George Soros. We saw that with the Bush dynasty. We saw it with the Clinton dynasty. That is the nature of the money junkies. And there are a lot of money junkies who cannot claim royal descent or dynastic descent, but it's simply, it's a new way of playing the same game all over again. Power over the people, and, the idea of royalty as a real part of government went out with the lie of rule by divine right. So they had to change costumes and come up with some other way to remind us all that we're supposed to do as we're told. The current model is, if you owe money to the bank, you do what the bank tells you. But it's the same scam.
How come we never hear about the de facto royalty on a local basis? As in, where does our state senators and congressmen come from. They come out of the same localized pool that's been dominating huge, vast pieces of wealth-producing land.
Yeah, I mean, and these are people with advantages. You know, they've inherited a tremendous amount of wealth. I don't want to call them royalty, though. I really don't think that's legitimate. Anyway, listen, Paul, I got to let you go. We got a bunch of calls I need to get to here. We're going to switch over to Al in New Jersey. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Oh, Mike, hi, how are you? Finally got you. I've been meaning to call you because I finally figured out what it is about Ted Cruz and the illegal Mexicans. This is the North American Union that they're springing on us on the sly. And if it were a Mexican, it would be too obvious. But this is what they're doing.
Well, you know, a lot of people have had that same comment that basically our political party is already thinking as if they're the North American Union, but the North American Union doesn't exist yet, and the Constitution is still the supreme law of this land.
Of course.
When they come on out and say, well, we're going to shred the Constitution and we'll just decide what's best for you, that will trigger, I think, a violent uprising.
But they've been shredding it.
Yeah, they have, and people are aware of that. They're alerted to that now, but to just come on out and say the foundation document, you know, we're going to toss it in the shredder, and it's a difficult situation because most Americans do understand the authority of the federal government rests on that Constitution. If they're not following the rules or if they just throw it away, they're throwing away their own legitimacy. Of course, at this point, I don't think this government's legitimate anymore anyway.
No, it's not. Thank you.
All right, we're going to let you go, and we're going to switch over to James in Tokyo. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Michael, I'm very upset at you. I've went to university in Canada, in Montreal, for 4 years, and I just find it absolutely terrible that you insult the Canadian people by calling Cruz a Canadian.
He was born in Canada of parents who were Canadian. He's got a Canadian birth certificate. I'm sorry if you're upset about that, but, you know, it's not like I had anything to do with Cruz's mother getting pregnant.
Well, I like you and respect you a lot, and I'll probably get over it after a few months of therapy, Michael.
Okay.
Anyway, I want to talk about...
Try some of that fine Canadian whiskey. That's less expensive and more effective than therapy.
Yes, sir. I will do that. The Japanese yen. It's appreciated about 20% over the dollar, even though they went to negative interest rates. But the negative interest rates were in the bonds, but not yet in the bank accounts, but they will probably get there. But the only reason I could see it going that way is because they're expecting other currencies throughout Europe and the United States to go the same way. I was wondering what your thoughts were about that.
Well, at this point, it seems like all these various banks are fighting holding actions. That 11th marble I've been warning you all about is definitely headed back down to earth, and right now it's about the size of the rock that wiped out the dinosaurs. The U.S. still wants to craft an end result of the crash that will return the world to being dependent on the U.S. dollar, so that the U.S. financial system will make a mafia-like piece of the action off of other people's commerce around the globe. That was the hidden agenda behind Bretton Woods. It was a very favorable economic arrangement for the United States of America. The rest of the world has turned away from it. But with the core problem of private central banking is that it always creates more debt than money with which to pay that debt until the debt accumulates to the point where it brings the whole system down. Now, in the past, when the central banks were running independently, when one of them crashed, the others would step on in and rescue it. But because of economic globalism, the entire system is now networked and linked, and it's all being dragged down at the same time. And it's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for the people of planet Earth to say, all right, we've tried that experiment. It was great for the bankers, not so good for us. No more. No more private central banks. Okay?
Okay, thanks, Mike.
All right, thank you. We're going to switch over here to James in South Carolina. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Mike, I'd like to make a suggestion.
Yes.
I would like for you to call the state Republican Party in a state that's having an upcoming primary and challenge them about their knowledge as to whether or not Cruz is eligible or not. and do it on the air.
Well, I'll think about doing that, but I'll tell you right now what they're going to say. They're going to say the Board of Elections said he's eligible, and we've got all these judges who say he's eligible. And my position at this point is I refuse to cede authority over my own thinking either to a GOP party leader or a judge or an election commission. We all know he is not eligible. But that's going to be their answer is, we have experts that we pay that say he is, and you should just sit down and shut up and listen to them. We'll tell you what to think. How Soviet Union of them. Anyway, I'll look into doing that. Maybe I can. Maybe
one more thing.
Okay.
In my state, South Carolina, I called them back before our primary, and I couldn't get them to. I could never get them to admit who vetted the man. Besides that, I'm not sure the election commission has anything to do with the primary because the primary is private. That's just my suggestion. Thank you, Michael.
All right. Well, James, you're absolutely right. They're just saying whatever they need to say to keep their agenda going. But neither Ted Cruz nor Hillary Clinton is really legally eligible to hold the office of the presidency. Ted Cruz because of his Canadian birth, and Hillary Clinton because she violated Title 18. All right. Let's see. We got a bunch of calls still waiting, but we're coming up on a commercial break, so I'm going to let you all sit there. Boy, we got a lot of calls today. I'm going to have trouble getting through all my talking points here. Definitely need to shoehorn human-caused global warming in on that one. All right, so we're going to take another break for commercials, and we'll be back with more phone calls after these few words from our sponsors. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, and we're going to go right back to the phone here. Brian in San Francisco. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Brian, are you there? Brian, are you there? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and put Brian back on hold, and we're going to go to Laura. And aloha, Laura. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. I'm in Colorado. I'm a broadcaster, and I listen to your show on a regular basis because you're so factual and you're just right on. And I wanted to let you know what I had received from very close and personal friends of mine who had been at the convention in Denver, and they were all extremely outraged. In fact, they are so outraged this morning. I got a call, and we're trying to wait until we get the facts on a protest that's being organized outside of GOP offices. So as soon as I hear about that, I'll go ahead and notify you by email. But apparently the whole thing was so extremely corrupt that people that were on the floor actually knew what was happening when it was happening. And there was just an outrage that broke loose in groups that were there on the convention floor. So Colorado has got a huge reputation for being extremely corrupt. Even down on the lowest scum, bottom of the barrel, local little city and county type of things, Colorado's got horrible corruption. And, a big part of this, Mike, is because of complacency and apathy. And the people just aren't willing to get off their butts and do anything.
Well, no, wait a minute. Let me take the side of the people. We are raised to think that we should allow the government to police crime and police itself, and we're still hoping that that's going to happen. It obviously isn't. And I think at the point where people realize that the system is not policing itself, that is in fact protecting itself from the people, I think people are going to get off their rear ends, and they're going to get very, very angry because, this has been building for decades. And there's a huge amount of anger out there in the general population, and all the fluoride in the drinking water isn't going to keep that tamped down much longer.
Well, I understand where you're coming from. I started a property rights coalition in El Paso County, which is where NORAD is, and we've got the Air Force Academy and everything else, and we were trying to fight a very corrupt situation here. We weren't even allowed, our Property Rights Coalition, which was an LCA, a Limited Cooperative Association, through the Secretary of State, was not even allowed with our Denver land use attorneys to even come into court. The judge put us off for so many months that they literally broke the Village Coalition because we just couldn't afford to keep paying attorney's fees and just were not allowed in court. Now, at the same time, a $72 billion corporation was acting as co-defendants with the El Paso County Commissioners and the county attorneys. So when I say corrupt, I'm not joking. I have been involved in it for a very long time as far as trying to get people motivated into doing something. And here in my county, and I'm not going to blame the military, but we do have 80% military here, and they are told, eyes down, single file, march along, and to get some of those people involved in doing anything to stand up against corruption is just part near impossible.
Well, my experience out here in Hawaii, we also have a high density of military. When they're in the ranks or on the base, same thing. When they're off the base, a little bit different. There's a lot of military here who are now aware that rather than protect and defend the United States from foreign enemies, they're just hired mercenaries being sent out to conquer other people's wealth. Anyway, listen, Laura, thank you very much. We're going to let you go here. I think we've got Brian in San Francisco back online again. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, I'm sorry, Mike. I cut myself off. Maybe a senior moment. But having said that, did you watch 60 Minutes last night?
I did take a peek at it, and I got kind of angry enough to cause physical harm to the TV, and I shut it off after about 10 minutes. But you know, they're trying to sell the idea that now Saudi Arabia is to blame for 9/11, and you need to remember 60 Minutes. I don't tend to watch them anyway because they've discredited themselves so many times over the year. We have a video of the executive producer of 60 Minutes, Don Hewitt, admitting on camera that 60 Minutes edited their segment on Jennifer Flowers to discredit her and help Bill Clinton win the nomination. So right there, that tells you you shouldn't be taking anything 60 Minutes says at face value. 60 Minutes was out there telling us that Afghanistan did 9/11, and then they were telling us Iraq did 9/11, and now they're telling us the Saudis did 9/11, and we're supposed to believe it. And they didn't mention the arrested Mossad agents at the World Trade Center on 9/11. They didn't mention all the huge number of architects and engineers and scientists who are saying the official story is impossible. They're just out there selling the same Kool-Aid they've been selling all along, only now they're going to put the blame on Saudi Arabia to, first of all, protect Israel, because we all know who really was behind 9/11, the U.S. and Israel working together. Remember when it happened? Netanyahu said this is a good thing. Then he backed off and said, well, no, it's not a good thing. I didn't mean to say that. It will build sympathy for Israel, which is why they do these false flag attacks. And a little bit of common sense, and I want you all to listen closely, because when anybody talks about, oh, those mean Saudis, they did 9/11, they're being tarnished with it to open the door for an eventual war on them. They're about to learn a very hard lesson about how the United States rewards its staunchest allies in the Middle East. And it's simply this. If Saudi Arabia wanted to harm the United States of America, they don't need to crash airplanes into buildings to do it. They have invested billions of dollars of their oil revenue in the United States of America. All they have to do is ask for it back, and that would destroy the U.S. economy, and it would make 9/11 itself look like a minor speed bump in terms of devastation. And it would be perfectly legal and moral for Saudi Arabia to do that. Now, for Saudi Arabia to crash airplanes into buildings, they run the risk of having all their wealth that's invested in the United States confiscated and frozen. They're not going to take that risk. And don't forget, there were those Mossad agents who were arrested cheering and dancing as the World Trade Towers came down. And on Carl Cameron's 4-part story on the Israeli spy ring, he quoted a U.S. government official saying there was evidence that linked these Mossad agents to 9/11. That evidence was classified by the United States government.
Mike, thanks. You said a lot of things and helped frame my thinking on the subject. I was sort of disgusted also, but I wanted to listen to it. Thank you very much.
All right, you got it there, and we're going to switch over to Pete in Tampa, Florida. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. Thanks for taking my call. I have a couple questions for you. The first question has to do with the Constitution. I have not been able to find this yet, but outside of treason, do you have any idea what the penalty is for government employees who violate the Constitution?
Well, the penalty is supposed to be that we kick them out of office, but you have to have honest and fair elections for that to happen. There are penalties in the U.S. Code for misbehaving government people, and again, this gets back to Title 18 and Hillary Clinton, because if you violate any of the provisions of Title 18, you are banned from public office at that point.
Yep, I would agree. And official misconduct and so on and so forth. You're right. My second question is a little off topic, but it's something I'd like to get out there in the public. You know from coming from the graphics background that the federal government, any kind of work they produce, for example, graphics, it becomes public domain, right?
It's supposed to, because it's paid for with our tax dollars. All the paperwork is supposed to be our property. But unfortunately, we have seen lately where patents developed at taxpayer expense quickly become privatized.
And that's my question. So if the federal government, for example, the Department of Health and Human Services, has a patent on the neuroprotective and antioxidant effects of cannabis, doesn't that make all taxpayers in the country's party to that patent?
It should, and under the way the country was being run half a century ago, yes, it would. The proceeds from that patent would go into the public treasury and help support society. But we have seen a lot of these patented technologies transferred into private ownership, the same way we're seeing that land that's been seized by the Bureau of Land Management is transferred into private ownership for commercial exploitation. The federal government just isn't playing by the rules anymore. They're just doing whatever they think is going to get them a fast buck and more power and more glory, and that's basically it.
Yeah, I would agree. I think I really appreciate the idea that you're trying to keep everybody calm and saying, hey, maybe the peaceful, the everything will collapse and we would have to do it without having to fight. But we couldn't get by that with the first revolution without having to fight. So I'm unfortunately thinking it's going to come down to that.
Well, I thank you very much. I hope you're wrong. I don't know that you're wrong, but I hope you're wrong. We got to take a break for our top of the hour news and commercials, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 877-300-7645. Now, in the last hour, I was talking about this gentleman, Victor Williams, who has filed for and declared himself a GOP write-in candidate for President of the United States of America. This gives him standing to take legal action against Ted Cruz for trying to be president without meeting the constitutional requirements. And here's where it gets interesting. Over in New Jersey, the Secretary of State is going to hold a hearing on whether Ted Cruz ought to be disqualified from the New Jersey ballot. So this is starting to get some traction. No wonder they're talking about drafting Paul Ryan. They have to realize that Cruz is a liability. They're using him to take votes away from Donald Trump and force a contested convention. But they have to know sooner or later somebody's actually going to have to stand up and say, yeah, he was born in Canada. He's a naturalized U.S. citizen. But that's not the same thing as natural born. So this is definitely moving forward. All right, now then. As you know, Hillary Clinton is running her campaign on her long years of experience in the government. And, of course, the only real office she's ever held, besides being a senator, was Secretary of State. And former President Jimmy Carter is saying there's nothing there. Hillary Clinton took very little action as Secretary of State to bring about peace. In fact, she was a very pro-war Secretary of State. John Pilger is out there saying Hillary Clinton is way more dangerous than Donald Trump. Now, as we mentioned before, Bernie Sanders won Wyoming, but somehow Hillary Clinton got 11 delegates to Bernie Sanders' 7. The whole system is crooked. Hillary Clinton's had another fundraiser hosted by an all-star cast of financial regulators who joined Wall Street. These are all people who used to be regulating Wall Street on behalf of the government, and when they left the government, Wall Street welcomed them with open arms and high-paying jobs, which calls into question just how much due diligence they were doing. Remember, the Securities Exchange Commission turned a blind eye to Bernie Madoff for 12 years while he ran his Ponzi scheme. Now, we repeated a story coming out of Counterpunch about how Hillary Clinton literally bought the loyalty of 33 state Democratic parties. Now, as you know, Citizens United sort of opened the spigots for campaign contributions. And there's no aggregate limit. If you can set up new political action committees, you can get donations from the same people over and over and over again. And Hillary Clinton set up the Hillary Clinton Victory Fund, which may seem arrogant, but basically people donating to that fund, that money was in turn donated to the state Democratic parties on the condition that the superdelegates support Hillary Clinton. She's trying to buy the White House. And somebody needs to tell her it is not for sale. Now, people are starting to look back at Hillary Clinton's email server scandal, article coming out of RINF.com, pointing out all the sections of Title 18 that she's violated. And they are numerous. Now, here's where it gets interesting. President Obama just did an interview with Chris Wallace, who's an icon in news. And basically, he's trying to defend Hillary Clinton by saying, well, you know, there's classified and then there's classified. And, you know, not everything classified for the Secretary of State is all that important, really. But, you know, the rules are the rules. There's nothing in Title 18 that says there's classified and then there's classified. Then he goes on. Obama goes on with a statement, I guarantee the Justice Department will not protect Hillary. So if he's already officially denying it, the fix is definitely in. And Hillary's supporters are very worried. Now, the FBI director is saying that the investigation into possible criminality by Hillary Clinton is going to linger into the fall. That's bad press for her. And so Hillary's supporters are now demanding Barack Obama give her a presidential pardon and just shut the whole thing down. Because it's not fair for Hillary to have to run for the White House with all these allegations of criminality. And they're not all allegations. We know in one case, the proof that she violated Title 18 is part of the public record. That's the email that Hillary sent to her subordinate instructing him to strip the classification markings off a document and send it non-secure. That's a felony violation of Title 18 right there. And so now what they want, they clearly are getting worried about what's yet to be surfaced. They want Obama to just issue a blanket pardon for all crimes past and future, you get out of jail free card, so that she can campaign unimpeded for the White House. Well, if she's violated Title 18, she's not eligible to be in the White House. That's the law. Apparently, Saturday Night Live has turned against Hillary. They had a wonderful opening video. We have it linked to the front page of WhatReallyHappened.com. All right, let's grab ourselves a phone call from Mark in North Carolina. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, what's up, Mike? Mike, I don't know. I'm beginning to believe we're either going to turning into a banana republic. Okay. First of all, you have what they did in Colorado to Donald Trump, cancel the election. And I mean, you know, whatever happened to one man going one vote? They say, well, it's the rules. You know, rules. They get rid of the political party because this affects the whole country and this affects the people of this country. This goes against, you know, they always start the Constitution. Well, this goes against the Constitution. The other thing is what they did to Bernie there in Wyoming. I mean, you know, why not just say, look, we're going to steal it we're going to give it to whoever we want. Your vote don't mean anything. And that's it. We basically are now a banana republic, and we're going to treat you people like we're a banana republic.
Well, I'll tell you the reason they don't do that is because, you know, they justify the taxation and taking our children to die in foreign wars on this idea that we somehow voted for all this to happen. And if they come on out and say, yeah, we're a dictatorship now, they're going to see a lot of people refuse to fill out the forms, refuse to send their kids for these wars, and they don't have the resources to literally post armed guards on 300 million American citizens to keep us compliant.
Well, you know, one of my sons joined the Air Force right out of high school. He stayed for about 4 years, and then thank God he got out. All right, he went to Afghanistan and Iraq a few times, flew over there, you know, flew back with us, and thank God he's not in there anymore. He joined right after 9/11. Okay, a couple of years after 9/11. Mm-hmm. And I still believe the BS we were being told. So I told him, so I gave him my approval and said, yeah, great. If this was today, I would do everything in my power. Everything in my power. My kids were about to go into service today. I would tell them, no, do not go. Do not. This country doesn't appreciate you. They don't appreciate it. And they'll misuse you and use you for stuff we don't belong in. And that brings me my other question I have for you about, I heard you talking, I came home before. I didn't hear the whole conversation, but you kind of, like Saudi Arabia wasn't really involved in 9/11, with the 28 pages. I think they were, but not on their own. I believe they were working together with Bush. And I don't know about the Israelis, because were you talking about the dancing, what they call the dancing Israelis?
Well, that's one of the issues, yes. Yeah. They turned out to be Mossad. They turned out to be Mossad.
Yeah, I know. Did they find explosives in their vehicle?
They found traces of explosives in their vehicle. Okay.
Well, it seems to me that they were all working together.
Yeah, I think so. And maybe Saudi Arabia was helping, but I think they're going to try and make it look like Saudi Arabia did it all by themselves to sell us a new war. We got to take a break for commercials.
Oh.
Thank you very much for the phone call. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And interesting little story. The former Colorado State Republican Party Chairman, Ryan Kahl, was being interviewed by the Laura Ingraham show and basically expressing concern that the message the Republican Party is sending is your vote doesn't matter and your voice doesn't count. And there are going to be repercussions because ever since we were little tiny children in those state-controlled schools, we have been brainwashed to think that our votes matter. We are in control of our own destiny. And this election season, both the GOP and the Democratic Party are rubbing our noses in the fact that, no, actually the whole thing is rigged from top to bottom. The political elites have broken the contract with the American people that's enshrined in that Constitution in the Bill of Rights. All righty, let's see. We're going to grab a call from James in Ohio. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
I got involved in this thing when I was 12. My first involvement was participation in a tax protester demonstration. And in the course of this, I've learned the value of propaganda, which propaganda doesn't have to be a lie. It can all be truth. It just means information designed to persuade. And the people in the alt media, the independent media, the independent medicine, independent agriculture, all the divisions of what I would term the common people's advocacy have done a great job. However, relying on this exclusively or relying on the arms of the public as a fallback, let me tell you what it's been like for me. I was harassed and interrogated and followed by the FBI for 9 years of my life. I was drugged against my will.
Mm-hmm.
They attempted to, institutionalize me, all purely because of my belief system. And worse, I've lost relationships. I've been evicted. I've lost jobs. So,
Well, let me step in here. Okay, it sounds like you've had a tremendous run of ill treatment. Not everybody who stands up to speak truth to the power is treated the way you are. I mean, the government would like you to think that. They'd like you to think that, yes, we're going to come in the dead of night and we're going to duct tape you and take you away to the re-education center. It's logistically impossible. When you've got 300 million Americans, 80% of whom have firearms, and support for the presidency and Congress is in the single digits, all they've got left is a bluff. The same thing the Nazis did to the German people. They literally promoted this image of cruelty and black leather and, the Gestapo is everywhere and we hear everything and see it. And it was all a gigantic bluff, and the German people were dumb enough to believe it. And they lost their country because of it. Okay?
I understand that, but it is really important that I finish my point. Now they have CBR, which, for those who don't know, stands for chemical, biological, radiological, and they have air superiority, which frequently decides a conflict. And if people think that the Vietnamese won the Vietnam War, I got news for them. But
well, actually, what ended the war in Vietnam was the American people standing up. Former President Johnson wrote in his own papers that the day he looked out the White House window and saw 1 million people on that mall was the day he knew the Vietnam War had to come to an end. And again, the government is really good at whooping on small groups like the Bundys or the Hammonds, but for them to literally try and declare open war against their own population, that would have global international repercussions. And other nations would see an opportunity to come on in here and project their power into the mess, and that would mean a civil war. Anyway, listen, James, got to let you go. Got to get back to some other stories here. Now, a lot of attention is being focused back on 9/11 because of the CBS 60 Minutes story last night. So we reprised some of our articles on 9/11 that really make it obvious the official story is a load of USDA choice bovine excrement. The Secret Service at Booker Elementary, that's one of the most powerful arguments we have. We've all seen videos of how quickly the Secret Service reacted when Reagan was shot. We saw it again when that guy jumped the lines at the Donald Trump speech. They're trained to just move without thinking. And yet, on 9/11, George Bush was sitting at that school in Sarasota, Florida. And Andy Card comes in, it's on videotape, Andy Card comes on in, tells Bush a second building has been hit in New York, we're under terrorist attack. And not a single Secret Service agent moves. If the official story is to be believed, nobody knows how many hijacked planes were overhead or where they were. Bush's presence at the school was in the media 3 days ahead of time. And there was an airport just 4 miles away. Nobody is going to assume the president is safe there. The Secret Service would have been trained to grab him, throw him in that armored limousine, and start driving in a random direction to foil a potential inbound. And they didn't move, which means the Secret Service knew Bush was not in danger, and he was not a target. How did they know that? They knew ahead of time what the targets were going to be. So one of the strongest arguments against the official story. All right, we're going to move off from that. There's a huge amount of material out there about 9/11, and Richard Gage over at Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth is just doing phenomenal work on that. Former House Speaker Dennis Hastert apparently sexually abused at least 4 teens. This is coming out of his conviction for trying to conceal blackmail payments, structuring was what it was called, the hush money. And now there's talk that he may be sued by his victims over that. Now, getting on back to the Panama Papers, this is not going away. Even The Guardian had an article out there saying the 1% hide their money offshore, then use it to corrupt our democracy, which, by the way, is a classic symptom of the rise of fascism. All of these tax havens were created when politicians legalized them. Remember, the one in Panama was possible because Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton passed a Bush-era free trade agreement over the objection of people like Bernie Sanders, who said it's going to open up global, tax evasion. They created this for their own use so that they don't have to pay taxes. Taxes are for the little people. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And this situation in New Jersey is already kicking things up. Even the Washington Post is now running an article saying Donald Trump is right. Ted Cruz is not eligible to be president. So it's starting to come apart on that. And I'm going to repost my article on the meaning of natural born and the legal citations behind it and the reason it was put in the Constitution. It was set forth by Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, John Jay. That is in there so that the military might of the United States is never under the control of somebody who was born in another country. Canada, for example. Apparently, Senator Patrick Leahy of Vermont has now reversed himself. He's a superdelegate. He was going to support Clinton. He's just come out and said, I think maybe I'm going to go with Bernie Sanders. So it's starting to really come apart for those people. And good. I mean, that's what it should be. All right, let's grab a phone call. John in Barbados. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Michael. Yes, the Panama Papers. This is come at exactly the wrong time because Austria has now started the bail-ins, and all these people who've got their money offshore will avoid the bail-ins.
Yes.
And this is causing an absolute firestorm in Europe at the moment. It's going to blow the banking system sky high.
Well, it's not just going to blow the banking system sky high. You have all these people around the world who are paying immense amount of taxes to prop up this corrupt system, and now they're finding out the politicians have been creating all these legal havens so that they don't have to pay the taxes at all. A lot of people are going to be very upset about that.
Well, I mean, just the fact that these same people are going to avoid the bail-ins.
That's exactly right.
That have already started. I mean, the people are getting really angry in London particularly, and apparently there's a firestorm building in Parliament because Cameron is trying to alter the legal definitions, and there's going to be ruckus in Parliament. I think he's going to lose the confidence of his own party, and I think eventually somebody is going to file a vote of no confidence, and Cameron is gone.
Well, you know, I mean, there have been these massive protests out in front of number 10 Downing Street. They're basically saying Cameron should go, and he should. He has proven himself the most amazing hypocrite, but then all politicians are. They're out there saying, we're going to crack down on tax avoidance by you little people, and then you turn around and find out that they've set up all these little legal shelters for themselves to use, and they're designed so that you can't use them. These tax shelters are designed for corporations and politicians and movie stars and athletes to use. They're out of the reach of ordinary people. It's rigged that way. And what's really coming out of Great Britain now is they're starting to find out all these newspapers that are all huffed up about this horrible scandal of the Panama Papers. It turns out they were using the same dodges. All the corporations are in on this thing. The only people paying taxes are working class people. Everybody else is on a free ride if they're rich.
The other thing that I've noticed is that since these Panama Papers hit the headlines, and of course it's getting worse, the war in the Middle East, the Syrian conflict, it seemed to be knocked off the media, and we're looking at what it looks like to be a major move by the Syrian Arab army and the Russians into the city of Aleppo and Raqqa, and that will be the end of it, I would think.
Well, unfortunately, no. There's been a development over there we're going to get to here in just a little a bit, because remember we reported back on the 7th, 100 Turkish soldiers snuck into Syria, and I was wondering what that was for, because 100 isn't all that much. And then earlier today, rockets flew out of Syria and landed in Turkey, and now Erdogan is saying, oh, it's time to go to war. And so it looks like they're manufacturing an excuse to simply start a new outright ground invasion of Syria.
Well, unfortunately, they're going to be fighting Russia as well, so, I wouldn't be too enthusiastic if I was Erdogan.
Well, you need to understand the United States wants a war with Russia and China, meaning they want a war to destroy the ruble and the yuan and drag the world back to dependency on that U.S. dollar.
Well, looking at the state of American military equipment, I think they'd be foolish to take both of those nations on at the same time.
Well, it wouldn't be the first time that somebody thought more highly of their military than they should have. I mean, think about Hitler going to Moscow. Or Napoleon, for that matter.
And I mean, I think every adventure into Russia has come away with a bloody nose or a kick on the backside.
Yeah, very much so. All right, well, listen, John, got to let you go. We got a lot of stuff we got to cover today. Okay, so there is a Resign Cameron movement in Great Britain. Thousands gathered in front of number 10 Downing Street to ask the Prime Minister to step down. David Cameron is out there doing what politicians always do when they're caught with their hand in the cookie jar. You know, now that he's got his, well, we ought to close that cookie jar, really. You know, I will pass a new law. And I don't think anybody is really being fooled by this thing. There's another scandal coming on out. Apparently, David Cameron received £200,000 in gifts from his mother that was structured in a way to avoid the inheritance tax. Now, we're not just picking on David Cameron. The real scandal of the Panama Papers is how widespread it was. Remember, this one law firm is the fourth largest of the companies that do this thing, and it was only one office, too. This is big business out there, helping the rich and powerful not pay taxes so that you carry the tax burden. Because that's all you're good for, you know. Now, here's where it gets interesting. They're promising an inquiry over in Great Britain, and the guy they put in charge of running the inquiry into the Panama tax dodging scandal was a partner at the law firm that acted for these offshore firms, including the one set up by David Cameron's father. So we can expect this new inquiry to be as quickly forthcoming as the Chilcot inquiry into the Iraq War or that inquiry into high-level pedophilia among British politicians. I'm sure the report will be up here, 20, 30, 40 years down the road here. Interesting little story that came out of The Guardian, going back to how Panama became an independent country. Originally, it started as a province of Colombia, and Teddy Roosevelt went on down there and said, we're going to make it an independent country because we're going to build a canal through there, and it's going to be great for everybody. And this article points out how Roosevelt and J.P. Morgan set Panama up to be a tax haven right from the very, very start. Now, the Panama Papers story is about to get a little bit more interesting because we're going to count in there the El Salvador Papers. El Salvador officials raided their office of Mossack Fonseca and seized all the documents. When they got there, everything was being packed up. They were getting ready to skedaddle. So now there's a new trove of these tax-sheltered documents that are going to be coming on up. Let's see, the Guardian's Offshore Secrets, that's an interesting video. You're finding out all these corporations are using these tax dodges. And they're all avoiding taxes. Who pays the taxes? You do. That's your job. We'll be right back about Syria. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. Now, let's talk about what's going on down in Syria because, as John in Barbados indicated, Syria is ramping up for the operation to retake Aleppo. Russia will be assisting them. So the powers that want Assad out are desperate. They're in a corner, and it looks like they just uncorked a false flag. Because we're seeing stories all over the net. This is in Russia Today. Rockets from Syria hit Turkish town Kilis. Injuries feared. So these weren't very effective rockets. And the Russia Today article admits they don't know exactly where the rockets came from. If it was areas controlled by Islamic State militants or the Syrian government. Well, I have another theory. Because back on the 7th, there was a story being carried by Sputnik News about how 100 Turkish Special Forces troops crossed into Syria. And at the time I was saying, I don't know what they're doing because 100 isn't a large force. And so I would say that this is most likely the source of the rockets being fired from Syria into Turkey, because Assad's not dumb enough to do that. We're seeing more indicators what's going on. Sputnik News. The Pentagon has announced they're going to increase the number of troops they have in Syria 5-fold because we have to go after ISIS or Daesh or whatever they're calling themselves this week. Nudge, nudge, wink, wink, say no more. Meanwhile, another story coming out of Rense.com. U.S., British, Turkish special forces are aiding ISIS in Syria. ISIS is a tool of the United States, and it has been ever since its creation with all those professionally produced videos coming out of Rita Katz Productions from the Site Studios. The Free Syrian Army is a U.S. creation. 95% of the people fighting in the Free Syria Army are not even from Syria. They're all hired foreign mercenaries. All right, we're going to go ahead and grab ourselves a phone call. Mo in Florida. Aloha, what's on your mind?
Call Michael. I'll be quick. First of all, I totally agree. The legal term is cui bono, right? Who benefits? And
yes.
That's so simple. I mean, why would Saudi Arabia do that? It makes no sense. But my question is this. I never heard you talk about Anonymous. And, they made that threat to Ted Cruz. Is that a psyop or are they real? I know they exposed some other stuff, but I'll take your answer off the air. Thanks.
Okay, well, we know that there's a lot of manufactured groups out there, and we have to be very, very careful because Anonymous, you have to look not what they're saying, what they're doing. Who are they going after? You would think that a real grassroots coalition of good guy hackers would have gotten to the Panama Papers ahead of the leak. They never really seem to go after the real top bad people. They're always a convenient tool of attack to target other people. I've always been rather dubious about Julian Assange and WikiLeaks because it was only 3 months after WikiLeaks' domain was registered and Assange and WikiLeaks were on the covers of the major magazines, Time and Newsweek, and they hadn't actually done anything at that point. Meanwhile, you had truth activists who'd been doing this for decades that are still to this very day ignored by the establishment media. And so you have to wonder, why is the establishment media giving so much press to these groups, whether it's WikiLeaks or Anonymous? So you have to really, really be careful about that. All right, getting on to Afghanistan. Secretary of State John Kerry over the weekend said that the political deal that created Afghanistan's national unity government in 2014, meaning the U.S. puppets, does not actually have an expiration date. Despite widespread expectations, it would end this September. And what Kerry is saying is the U.S. is going to remain in Afghanistan, at least until the oil and the opium run out. It's now a permanent garrison of the modern American empire, as it were. Okay, now here's an interesting little story. We've been talking about the drone strikes, the extrajudicial executions, and we're always told we're going after terrorists, we're going after the bad people. And now we find out that these drone strikes are being used for other purposes, such as killing off drug lords who are competition for the CIA's drug smuggling business. And apparently the U.S. is using the drone program as an assassination unit, which under the cover of the war on terror is hitting targets supplied to them by GCHQ and even the British police. Now, Britain has abolished capital punishment in its courts back in 1965, but according to this report, the British government now supports the death penalty without any trial at all. All in the name of the war on terror. Oh, the terrorists are coming to get you, the terrorists are coming to get you. Actually, according to a new report from the RAND Corporation, which is a very large think tank, they've been around for decades. This is where the U.S. government goes to find out what's really going on about things. And the RAND Corporation is saying terrorism is actually insignificant against the size of the whole population, and it's been declining since the 1970s, not counting the obvious false flag stagings. Meanwhile, up in Ukraine, Joe Biden is out there proclaiming the success of Ukraine's transformation just as the prime minister resigns over corruption. Politicians love to brag about things they've done, even if it's not worked out very well. 2 years ago, Obama was proclaiming Yemen was a successful intervention. And now look at how it is today. Meanwhile, a Taiwan-born U.S. Navy officer is going to stand trial for espionage and prostitution, and he did it to himself, because everyone knows you have to be a candidate for president to be allowed to get away with that kind of thing. And it's the U.S. double standard on display again. Yeah, they're going to go after Petraeus, going to go after this U.S. Navy officer, and they should. But Hillary, we can't go after Hillary. They'll call us, misogynists if we dare arrest Hillary for possibly spying. And by the way, behind all of this stuff about the email server, that is still a question that deserves an answer. Given the Clintons' past activities, the Chinagate scandal from 1996, it is legitimate to ask if Hillary was selling U.S. secrets through her weak private email server and collecting and laundering the payments through that so-called charitable foundation. Now, Richard Gage is touring the nation right now, talking about Building 7, and they've reached a milestone. They've crossed 2,500 architecture and engineering professionals who have signed a petition for a new investigation. I don't know who they're going to get to investigate it. I certainly wouldn't trust the U.S. government to investigate itself again. It's just another chance to polish up the lies at taxpayer expense. But you can look at the evidence for yourself, the evidence for the thermite, the evidence for the cutting charges. It's out there. You just have to find it. Now let's talk about the economy here a little bit. This is now getting serious. Austria just announced a 54% haircut of senior creditors in the first bank bail-in under the new European rules they just made up. 54%. That is serious losses being incurred by these creditors, and it will have a ripple effect. And as John in Barbados pointed out, all those ultra-rich politicians and celebrities and corporations who are using these tax havens to store their wealth, they're not going to get the haircut. The haircut is, like taxes, for you, the little people, to have to deal with. Italy is now struggling. They're seeking a last resort bailout. It won't be the last. They want to ring fence their troubled banks. They're coming up with all kinds of new words. We have to ring fence it. We have to do that. It's basically all the same thing. Take money away from ordinary people and give it to the banks so the banks can loan it back to the people at interest. That's what it always comes down to. Taking your money, giving it to the banks so the banks can lend it back to you at interest. That's the scam. Got to take a break for commercials and news. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. Hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 877-300-7645. I can see we've already got a caller on the line. And we're talking about the economy all around the world. Leaders are hitting the panic button. Down in Puerto Rico, their governor, Alejandro Garcia Padilla, has declared an emergency. At Puerto Rico's Government Development Bank, this is the big one, and basically pulled the plug on its lending power and freezing withdrawals because this bank is coming up on a major debt payment May 1st. And it doesn't look like they're going to be able to make it. Now, Puerto Rico has defaulted on some of their debts before, but they've always been minor. This is going to be a serious problem if there is a default. And Puerto Rico's government is following the same advice other governments around the world are. Just steal the money from the people. Give it to the bankers. All hail the bankers. Story coming out of PatriotRising.com. We're all in trouble. Government debt is about to hit hopeless levels. And what they're talking about is that the debt here in the United States, Europe, all around the world, is now larger than the amount of money the entire economy can produce. And it's always been that way. That is the natural instability designed into private central banks. The instant that first pretty printed piece of paper goes into circulation, more money is owed to the bank than actually exists. That's the trap. That's the enslavement. Doesn't matter how hard you work. Doesn't matter how much you sacrifice. You can never get out of that debt slavery. Unless you go the way that King Philip the Fair did. Torture and kill the bankers and write off the debt. Now, there's another story coming on out of Zero Hedge, asking if the canary in the coal mine of New York's luxury housing market just died. And they're talking about a company, Urban Core. And they have just canceled the condo complex. They're going to convert it to rental units. And apparently Urban Core's attorneys have severed their contract with the company. They want to delink. Board member James Somerville announced he's quitting just 2 weeks after he joined the board. We're going to start seeing this accelerating. Now, John Oliver, last week tonight, very funny show, worth tuning in. And he did a segment on why your credit report could be a nightmare, because they did an investigation. And they found out that 25% of all credit reports have mistakes. 1 out of every 20 have serious errors, including cases of mistaken identity. And this can cause a major problem because consumers are fighting to say, I'm not that guy, I didn't write that check, I didn't sign that contract. And as long as that black mark is on your credit report, it makes it hard to buy a car or a home, rent an apartment. A lot of employers will look at your credit report before they offer you a job. And they're full of mistakes. So you might want to tune in on that one. Wells Fargo has admitted deception. Back during that whole mortgage-backed security fraud, they have settled $1.2 billion fine. And all claims against Kurt Lofrano, the former Wells Fargo vice president, have been dropped as part of the deal. Nobody goes to jail, even as they admit criminality. Goldman Sachs is paying $5 billion for misleading mortgage bond investors. Wow, $5 billion. It sounds like a lot of money, and to you and I, it is. There's only 2 problems with it. It's a wrist slap compared to how much money Goldman Sachs and Wells Fargo made off of this fraud. And worse, the vast majority of these fines and settlements are tax deductible, which means Goldman Sachs may be out of pocket less than $1 billion. Who picks up the slack in the tax revenues? You do. Another story coming out of Zero Hedge. The current supply chain slump is worse than in the Great Recession. The recovery has stalled. It's going downhill. What do we mean by supply chain? Well, before you can go to the store and buy anything, it has to be supplied. From the farm or the manufacturer to shipping to wholesaler to warehousing to distribution. Then it's on the shelf and you buy it. That's the supply chain. And all around we're seeing the supply chains in trouble. The Baltic Dry Index is at record lows. Trucking indexes are at lows. People are not buying things off the supermarket shelves. If you're like me, you probably noticed in your local supermarket, there are now huge gaps on the shelves. Product isn't getting in there anymore. And there's no selection. They're carrying a few things they know you have to buy, and that's basically it. We're going to go ahead and grab ourselves a phone call from Guy in Los Angeles. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. Yeah, I was just thinking about a couple things. Remember Groucho Marx saying, I would never join a club that would have me as a member?
Yes, it was one of his funniest lines.
What I get from it is it's a contrived way of saying that I wouldn't belong to a group that can be manipulated.
Well, that's one possible way to interpret it, but, Groucho Marx, part of his presentation to the audience is that he was a very disreputable character. He was a huckster, he was a con artist, and that if you look at the Marx Brothers movies, he's always finding a way to sneak around and get things that he's not really entitled to, like Captain Spaulding. By the way, little story, and I actually got this from Groucho's wife. I worked with her on a project in Los Angeles many, many, many years ago. You know the song, Hooray for Captain Spaulding, the African explorer, and so forth and so on. Do you know who Captain Spaulding really was? Was the Marx Brothers drug dealer.
Oh, you're kidding.
No, I'm not. That's the story I got from Groucho's second wife.
Kind of like the Beatles and Dr. Roberts.
Yes, very little coded references that the fans go crazy about. Anything else, Guy?
I just wanted to say, this is from another movie I just recently watched. I don't know why it was so late watching it, but it was very good. And I think you'll be able to figure out what it is. Remember, the 22nd of November, gunpowder, treason, and plot.
Mm-hmm.
I know of no reason why the gunpowder and treason should not be forgot.
Should ever be forgot. Well, you know, that's from Guy Fawkes Day, and of course it's a central element to the movie V for Vendetta. And it's kind of interesting that Britons are so brainwashed that they celebrate the torture, death, and hanging of somebody who wanted to free them from tyranny. But, you know, the brainwashing is pretty much complete.
I think everybody should watch that movie again.
Absolutely V for Vendetta. It's enjoying a huge vogue right now. And there's a lot of good movies coming on out. I was noticing on cable. And yes, we're all waiting for Star Wars and the rest of it. But the Big Short, you should be seeing that one. Consumed, the one about GMO food. And we're all waiting for Vaxxed to get into distribution so we can buy our little DVDs and see what all the fuss was about.
Yeah, this GMO thing is really out of hand.
It's all out of hand. We have descended to this state of fascism where corporations and governments just peddle whatever they feel like peddling as long as it makes them money, and they don't care if it hurts us because, hey, they get more money from us if we're kept in a permanent state of sickness and ill health.
That's why I don't take vaccine.
Well, I don't either, but that's why they're now coming out with laws. You will have a vaccination. You will accept the needle. And that right there is tyranny and dictatorship. You know, especially where they're realizing the most recent flu vaccine actually didn't work. We got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back with another phone call. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. Still no word from that hearing in New Jersey about Ted Cruz, eligibility to be on the ballot. I think Victor Williams has weakened his case because he's stipulating that Ted Cruz was an American at the moment of his birth, and he's wrong on that one. Ted Cruz's mother renounced her U.S. citizenship to become a Canadian citizen. Ted Cruz was born in Canada of Canadian parents. He didn't become a U.S. citizen until 12 years after he moved here with his family. So Victor is focusing entirely on the natural born clause, and that is to his detriment. Because it is arguable that Ted Cruz actually wasn't a U.S. citizen until 12 years after he came to the United States of America. So, now, a prominent Danish professor writing in the Danish newspaper Jyllands-Posten, Helmuth Nyborg, is out there saying that this immigration crisis into Europe is going to lead to a civil war. Because contrary to the expectation of the New World Order people, the Europeans and the Middle Easterns aren't going to hug each other and sing Kumbaya. They're going to form a stratified society. And obviously the Europeans who have been there for hundreds, thousands of years are going to be seeing themselves as the upper strata. And the refugees and the immigrants are going to be seeing themselves as oppressed. And it's going to lead to social strife. These people who were thinking about this whole New World Order agenda of blurring everybody together didn't think it all the way through. They're still in love with that liberal myth that you can change people's minds by changing the environment around them. That is a foundation principle of liberalism. And it all goes back to Margaret Mead and her book, Coming of Age in Samoa, which turned out to be an academic hoax. She didn't go down there to find out what was going on. She went down there to try and prove a particular point of view. And she hooked up with a couple of Samoan women, and Polynesians in general, and Samoans in particular, love to talk story. And out of politeness, they went along the direction Margaret Mead clearly wanted them to go. Margaret Mead wrote it down like it was the truth. There are major, major provable errors in her book. But it became the holy writ of the liberalist philosophy that we're all born with absolutely blank minds, and all that we are is a result of the environment around us. And if we give the little girls and little boys a gender-neutral upbringing, and we force them to wear gender-neutral clothing, and force them to use the same bathroom and play with the same toys and everything, the reality is the little boys are going to act like little boys, and the little girls are going to act like little girls, and it's always been that way. Now, you remember not too long ago, last week, in fact, over at Lackland Air Force Base, there was a shooting. And now they've identified the shooter, Stephen D. Bellino. He's a former FBI agent. Maybe they're disarming the wrong segment of our society in this rush to stop these tragic shootings. All right, so let's see. Postcrescent.com, summer businesses debut in snow. It's up in Wisconsin, where seasonal businesses are now starting to get ready for the warm season, and they're still having to deal with snow. Story out of the Journal over in Ireland. Sometimes it snows in April. Here are some photos from Kerry to prove it. Say it ain't snow. April flurries cover Metro Detroit. They're saying hopefully it's the last snow of this very, very late winter, but the National Weather Service is not holding their breath. There may actually be more on the way. Spring snow hits Pittsburgh. Saturday's snow in Cleveland made the record books. Gale warning issued for Lake Superior. More snow for Upper Peninsula. Snow creeps back into Beaver County. It's from the Times Online. Snow, thunderstorms, and rain in East Idaho's forecast. Now, this winter has been hard for a lot of people. 2/3 of Londoners cannot afford home heating, especially those pensioners. And winter deaths, death from freezing to death, hit the highest level in 15 years this last winter. Meanwhile, Barack Obama is out there. According to an article in Investment Watch blog, Obama says that global warming deniers are a threat to the national security. And they're organizing state attorney generals to go on out and try and intimidate anybody who doubts the most holy revealed dogma of human-caused global warming, to try and silence us. Does that sound like democracy? Does it sound like freedom of speech? When you have the government working to intimidate people to go along with a proven hoax, that's dictatorship. Meanwhile, tragic news. This is from PatriotRising.com. We are sad to report that Punxsutawney Phil, the groundhog from the Groundhog Day, has been found dead. And they're saying that he was apparently very depressed over last February's prediction of an early spring, which has not happened. And poor Phil, it was just too much for him. And they think he committed suicide. I don't see any blood on the gun or on Phil's paws. Plus, Phil owned a silver-colored gun. So I'm suspicious. I'm suspicious here about this. I'm not buying the suicide thing just yet. Claire's laughing in the other room here. Okay. Let's see. Let's go ahead and grab a quick phone call from Ralph in New York City. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. How you doing?
Doing fine.
Mike, you just mentioned about the real estate economy in New York. I'm in the city. I don't know. You're a magician. I'm starting to see a lot of condos and high-end apartments here in the heart of Manhattan. It's becoming a little bit ghosty, but I see people moving in. I don't know, but you're a good predictor. I don't know how you do it.
Well, first of all, I never believe anything coming out of the establishment media and the government, and all that leaves is the real world.
Exactly. I mean, I'm just kind of curious because you just said in the button, because I see a lot of millennials, and they're coming from the West Coast from California and the Midwest. They're coming out here looking for opportunity here in New York. I'm like, what's over here? I don't get it. Can you explain that to me?
Well, I mean, New York is a place of opportunity, especially if you're in the financial businesses. And a lot of people are leaving California because the California government has just gone totally insane. And Claire and I spent the majority of our life in California. She's from San Francisco originally. We would never move back there. So I think it's more a case of people running from rather than running to New York. We got to let you go. We got to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. Now, as you know, there's been a big stink over the documentary Vaxxed. It was originally selected for the Tribeca Film Festival in New York. Then it was yanked. They found another venue to debut the movie out, sellout crowd. It was supposed to be at a film festival in Houston, Texas. That got canceled, literally at the request of the mayor of Houston. Because there's big money in the vaccines. And they are scared that people are starting to realize that they're just putting whatever they feel like putting into those needles just to make a fast buck. So we're seeing this article up here from theglobeandmail.com. And they're talking about how Canadian researchers have gone back and looked at the 2014-2015 flu season. And what they've discovered is the flu vaccine was less than 10% effective in preventing cases of the flu. And some people, it actually made them sicker. It increased the risk of them getting sicker. Now, you've probably been hearing in the news, everyone's all hot and bothered about the Zika virus. The Zika virus is coming. They're trying to blame the Zika virus for the epidemic of microcephalic babies down in Brazil. But if you look at the package insert for the vaccine that have been mandated for pregnant women in Brazil, microcephaly is one of the conditions it can cause. But we're going to blame the mosquitoes, or we're going to blame shaken baby syndrome because we're making money with this stuff, and nothing should ever get in the way of making money. So that's what's going on. They sell a dangerous product. It starts having a negative impact. They'll find something else to blame for it, and they go right on selling that dangerous product. Now, Vaxxed does have a distribution deal. And some point down the road, we'll see it on cable, and there will be DVDs available. And I certainly am planning on buying one myself. Now, in the world of computers, kind of an interesting story. Up in Seattle, there are these two outspoken privacy activists who got raided by the Seattle police. And they were taken out of their home, and the police were searching everything, claiming to be looking for child pornography. Now, they didn't find any child porn. It was just harassment. And these activists are Jan Baltman and David Robinson. They're co-founders of the Seattle Privacy Coalition, said from the comments the police were making about their cars and jobs and histories, they'd obviously been heavily researched. They were being spied on. And they really went through their home looking for child porn. They didn't find any. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Also in Seattle, there was a guy who was caught with 600 child pornography videos on his computer. He gets probation only. And as it turns out, this gentleman led the Seattle chapter of an FBI private sector group tasked with fighting computer crime and cyber terrorism. And this guy with all the child porn had access to a secure FBI online platform and email system. Now, activists are saying they think this guy's actual job was to break into the computers of people the government doesn't like to plant child porn on them so they could be raided and arrested and thrown to prison. And that looks to be what was being planned for these privacy advocates, except it didn't work. But this guy with 600 child pornography videos got probation when he got caught. Now, it's come on out that FBI Director James Comey covers his computer's webcam with tape, which is a very sensible precaution because you don't know who's watching you through that. And I remember when webcams first came out, they would have a little shutter or a little lid you could flip on down. But when the NSA started coming on out saying, we are watching you, the manufacturers were somehow persuaded not to bother including that anymore. But you can still use a Post-it note or a piece of tape or something else. If you're not using your webcam, it should be closed because you don't know who's peeking in. Water systems across New Mexico are now revealing high levels of lead, hazardous levels of lead. Now, remember when this whole Flint water supply scandal broke, and there was a story in the British press saying they had documents showing that virtually every major city east of the Mississippi had a problem with toxic water pouring out of their faucets in their homes. And I said at that time, doesn't mean the West is off the hook. It just means that the British media has only seen documents from east of the Mississippi. And now we're gaining a confirmation this is a nationwide problem. And apparently it's been known about for years. And they're trying to spin it away as, oh, it's not that big a deal. If you want clean water, you can just buy it from Nestle here. Now, to show you just how messed up the court system can be, there is a judge, U.S. District Judge Robert Hinkle, down in Florida, and they went after a dairy that was selling all natural skim milk. Comes out of the cow, they scoop off the heavy cream, they put it in a carton, and they say it's all natural skim milk. Sounds good to me. The court ruled otherwise. The judge said that they can only legally call it natural skim milk if it's injected with vitamin A. Well, if you're injecting chemicals into the milk, it's not natural anymore. It's anything but natural. And the judge says if they're not going to put the vitamin A into the milk, they have to label it as imitation skim milk. That's absurd. That's Alice through the looking glass. They have to label natural, real skim milk as imitation unless they pump chemicals into it under the state's direction, at which point they're allowed to say it's natural skim milk, except that it isn't anymore. And then you wonder why people don't trust all the assurances of the GMO food manufacturers and the vaccine makers. It's just absurd. They're using the courts and the law to change the labels on our food. Remember we were talking before about how a lot of product identifiers when you go to the store are not actually describing what's inside the product. They're being treated as brand names. The USDA, the FDA, have labeled 17 different kinds of fish that can be put in a can and sold under the name tuna. It's not actually, they're allowed to call it tuna as long as it's any one of these 17 species of fish. They're allowed to call it tuna. You're not getting tuna in that can, though. Honey is another big one. You'll get a jar that says honey on the front. That's a brand name. What's actually in there could be any kind of a sugar water flavor concoction. And for those of you who are tuned in to the natural healing properties of real, produced by the bees, honey, you're not getting it in there. It's deceptive advertising, but it's now become the law of the land. Story coming out of a Green Road blog spot about Fukushima saying that anybody who can afford to is leaving Tokyo and Japan due to the Fukushima contamination continuing to spread. They're actually starting to suffer population rundown, population drawdown. Okay, we got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Last segment of our program today, and I'm looking at another story here. We're talking about how the court system has just gone totally on over to the dark side. And there's an article coming out of the Free Thought Project where the United States Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals has now ruled that police officers can lie to suspects in regards to a traffic stop in order to be able to search the car, even when no actual traffic violation has occurred. Now, we're supposed to be safe from unreasonable search and seizure, but what the Ninth Circuit Court has just said is police officers have carte blanche to just pull anybody over for no reason whatsoever, just a hunch, or maybe they don't like the way you look. We are living in a dictatorship. Now, a little bit of good news coming out of the world of GMO. Monsanto profits have dropped 25% again as farmers and individuals and other food companies are switching back to organic, natural food. All of Monsanto's PR, propaganda people have not been able to hide the reality of how dangerous this technology is from the public. And we are seeing more and more food corporations start to adopt the GMO labeling that Vermont passed into law. And Monsanto is in a little bit of trouble because they put this technology out there. They were trying to force it on the world. The world has turned their back on it. So, hey, we'll just dump the GMO food on the American people. And now the American people are saying, no, we don't want this either. Monsanto's long-term plan was to control food production on planet Earth. Anybody growing any kind of food plant, including those who grow food plants to feed to animals, would have to buy their seeds from Monsanto. That was it. They were trying to establish a monopoly. And it's falling apart. And they've caused a huge amount of damage to the biosphere with this very reckless tinkering with the code of life. They've caused a lot of harm to organic farmers whose fields have been contaminated. And Monsanto loves to sue contaminated fields. Oh, you're using our patent without our permission. I didn't want it. Sue the wind or the birds or the insects who stole your patented genes and brought them into my farm. They should be treating these incidents of contamination of organic farms as an industrial accident, not an intellectual property issue. It's just absurd. This is the most dangerous technology that humankind has ever played with, tinkering with the code of life, and they still don't know what they're doing. They're just banging this stuff together and getting the product out as quickly as they can to make a buck on it. And we know that when you tinker with a particular piece of genetic material, it produces side effects throughout the entire organism, and nobody's looking for that. Nobody is trying to find that. They're not interested. all they want to do is validate that they're getting the result they want, Bt toxin or glyphosate resistance. And after that, they could care less. Now, one of the more benign examples that they've had about this unexpected altering of other parts of the organism was in the Roundup Ready corn. Because along with the glyphosate resistance, the genetic modifications produced a corn stalk that is much harder and stronger than the natural variety, to where corn farmers have to buy tractor tires with Kevlar belts, or their tires will be punctured. And we don't know what else is out there. Now, Monsanto likes to say, well, look, when you cook the food above a certain temperature, the DNA is destroyed, which is true. It's not the altered DNA that's the problem. It's the protein expression. The altered DNA is producing altered proteins, which your body is trying to incorporate, not always with a success. That's where these tumor problems in those French rat studies come from. And cooking the protein may not remove the damaged portion, unless you scorch it black. You know, a lot of people who talk about the possibility of intelligent life in the universe, and I'm absolutely convinced the universe is full of life. we may not be able to recognize it. We have a certain species-centric chauvinism where we're out there looking for life as we know it. We're never going to find life as we know it. All life evolves to adapt to the world that it's on. But maybe, people will say, why aren't alien civilizations stopping by for a visit? We may not be worth it. When you drive down the highway, do you stop at every ant farm you pass, pay a visit, take a look? Unless you're an entomologist or a pharmacologist, you probably don't. But there may be another explanation. And it may be that all advanced technology civilizations, get to this stage in development where they start tinkering with their own life code, and they make a mistake, and they go extinct. I am still very concerned about this epicite gene that was developed under a U.S. Department of Agriculture grant that produces a corn that, when eaten by humans, produces antibodies to human sperm. In other words, if you eat this corn, you cannot reproduce. And there's been a sharp decline in birth rates in the United States, particularly hitting the Hispanic community, which is one of the highest per capita consumers of corn products. Now, if this epicite gene were to break into the wild, and virtually all of these altered genes do sooner or later, they could contaminate the entire corn crop of the world. It could be an extinction level event. I still keep wondering if maybe all these people suffering from Morgellons disease are victims of one of the earliest GMO mistakes. And I say that, first of all, because the way the establishment media ridicules them and says, oh, it's all in their head, there's nothing there. But also, these strange fibers that pop out of these people. Somebody actually analyzed them and they found plant DNA in them. How does plant DNA get into your skin cells? It's a dangerous technology, and they should be very, very careful. Now, meanwhile, down in Africa, there is a South African prophet known as Maboro, and he's leader of incredible ministries. And this guy is now claiming that over Easter he was captured by angels and taken to heaven and brought back the same day. And fortunately, he had his cell phone with him, and he took pictures to prove that he had gone to heaven, which he will sell to you for roughly $350 US. Now, they leaked one of the pictures, obvious Photoshop job. But I guess there's a seeker born every minute. Okay. Now, all right, we're coming up here on the end of the show here, and we live in very strange, bizarre times. And I think it's instructive to look at the fallout from the Flint water crisis. They're not dealing with the water crisis. They're ducking the blame. The state's governor is saying, well, no, he shouldn't be held legally liable, even though they knew and they did nothing about it. It's, governing is choosing, governing is prioritizing. And I think we are coming up on the moment where the American people as a whole are going to have a palm-to-forehead moment and say, wow, they really do treat us like we're just farm animals and we only live for their pleasure and purpose and profit. All right, there's the music. Time for me to get on out of here. I got to do the Jim Goddard Show from Vancouver. We'll be back tomorrow, Tuesday, here on the Genesis Communication Network. Until then, stay safe, stay skeptical, stay informed, make good choices, and aloha, America.